Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today. From Physical to Digital, Make Your Paperless Office Dream a Reality. My name is Teresa Resick, and I'm the Director of Market Intelligence here at AIIM, and AIIM is your host and producer of today's event. And joining me are Steve Weissman of Holly Group and Damian Jones of OnTask. OnTask is the underwriter of today's webinar, and we thank them very much for their support. And thank you for taking the time to join us today. And as we get started, just want to offer a few tips for participating in today's webinar. By joining live, you can resize all the windows that are in front of you. Please do open up the group chat. That way you can message with each other and also with a few of us here at AIIM. Kate and I both will be popping in the group chat throughout today and be able there to answer your questions and help you with anything that you need. Download the resources that we have. It's off to the right of the slide area. Lots of cool links in there for you to explore. Ask questions of the speakers with that Q&A feature, and because we'll do our best to get to them all later in the webcast. Hopefully we should still have about 5 or 10 minutes to take questions towards the end. And do take the survey before you leave the webcast today. I truly value your feedback on how we did today, and you can also make some other suggestions and comments in there. And all of that's found in the little icons across the bottom of your screen. And this webinar is being recorded, and it will be posted to AIIM.org's Resources Webinars page in just a few days. And we're opening things up with a poll question today. And before I introduce the speakers here, we wanted to get a little pulse point of where you are today. So appreciate if you would come up to your keyboards and answer this question for you. What is your relationship with your paper processes today, with what's going on in your organization? Are you in love, that you love your paper? Are you codependent? Is it easier to stay together than to separate? It's complicated. I know I need to digitize, but I don't know where to start. Are you ready to split? That you're just fed up with the physical processes and ready to ditch the paper? Or have you separated already and you have no more paper processes, that you're digital, automated, and thriving? So go ahead and answer that question there, and I'm going to introduce the speakers who are joining us today. And as I mentioned, Steve Weissman is with the Holly Group, and Steve helps you do information right by bringing order and discipline to your governance and process practices. Internationally known as the InfoGov Guy, he is a principal consultant at Holly Group, where he furthers best practices for finding, leveraging, and protecting your business-critical information. And we also have with us Damian Jones, and he is that rare individual that is fluent in both engineer and English, so customers' business needs are understood and built into the products they love. Damian wants to help businesses transform the way they communicate with their customers and their employees to collect the right information the first time and to send that information on to where it needs to be. So since we took a look at that poll, and before I turn things over to Steve Weissman to begin our talk today, I just wanted to ask Steve to come up and take a look at these results with me. And I see here a few people are admitting that they are in love with their paper. And
I bet I know who that is.
About 30% of the folks are saying that it is complicated. They know they need to digitize. And 48% are ready to make that split. And so nice to see that about 9% of the folks here have already made that split and looking to pick up a few more tips on how to do it even more efficiently. So are you surprised at the breakout, the percentage of the results here, Steve?
No. This actually tracks pretty well with the direction my belly button is pointed. That's the ultimate gut level reaction, right? I see this with most of my clients, even within an organization. I'm thinking of one in particular where they actually have done a really good job digitizing. Within their organization, there are still people who are pushing plenty of paper, who are either by habit or by fear are terrified at the idea of having to give up their paper. So even within a single group, you'll find a mix like this. But the center of the bell curve we just saw, I think, is pretty typical. Most places know we could probably do a better job of this than we are, and they're ready to start poking at it to see what can be done.
Well, Steve, why don't you go ahead and take it from here and share your insights on how we can get there?
Well, okay, buckle in, folks. This is one of my favorite images of all time because, so you want to go paperless, eh? And here's a poor sap trying to stem the tide of the wave of paper that's coming at him. And part of the issue that this represents for me is the futility of having as your goal getting rid of all paper. It's not practical. And even if you were to get there, you'll find things, perhaps, you should pardon the double entendre, messier than you want it to be. Zero paper is entirely the wrong goal. People psychologically depend on paper, and I actually don't see that changing. For me, it's not paperless, but less paper. And that's entirely within reach and entirely reasonable. It doesn't even necessarily require a huge investment, certainly to begin the process of reducing paper. That, it certainly won't be as much of an investment as you may think. So throughout our session here today, I'm going to be encouraging you to do something, to do anything, but not just to sit back and be paralyzed by the analyses that you may or may not be doing, because doing nothing itself is a decision. So you're better off trying stuff and seeing what happens and adjusting as you go. We'll get into more of that later. But what really helps cut through a lot of that uncertainty is staying focused on efficiency. The business processes that are going on within your organization are the same processes that have existed forever. We've gone from, yes, and I say this mildly with tongue in cheek, but, carving images into stones and then making marks on pieces of papyrus. Nothing really has changed except the tools. And we've adopted over the millennia different kinds of tools to make it more efficient to do the things that we need to do. And that is exactly still what's going on today. You want to stay focused on doing what you do, but doing it better, faster, cheaper, easier, in a more responsive way. So if we look at the sort of typical route paper-based processes follow, and this is extracted from a lot of AIIM materials, a lot of experience. If somebody has an issue with this, I'll be surprised, but I would certainly love to hear it, because I think your case might be a little different, and that's where the education really comes from, for me anyway, as a consultant. But first you have to get this stuff in, right? And so we might get it through the regular mail, or we print something out. If we're doing it at all right, we're going to tag it somehow to help us get a handle on what it is that's coming in. So, who gets it? It could be a sticky note that says, give this to Bob. It could be something that's put in an interoffice mail envelope with the to field filled out. But we don't just take this pile of stuff and just bring it intact from station to station. We do label it in some way to help us get our arms around it and get that information on that paper to the right people. We got to process it in some way, right? So you might take a single document of multiple pages and clip them together and send them in as a packet. You might make copies of individual pages so certain things can be processed in parallel, or maybe you make copies of the whole thing and send it around. So if you think of a credit card application or an insurance policy claim or some such, there are things that have to happen to bring that paper-based issue to a resolution. But you're kind of stuck doing it sequentially if it's on paper, because it's really hard to share paper without duplicating the paper, which brings with it its own set of issues in terms of management, which is the most recent one, which is the accurate one, which one has the real signature, all that kind of stuff. So it gets processed somehow, and then it gets used for whatever the purpose is. file folders is the physical things we have in the cabinets that are cluttering up our offices or the drawers in your desk. It's a way we take the stuff that we're using to keep it at hand so that we can retrieve it right away if we need to refer to it or sign it or do something with it and send it on. At some point, we have to store it. So we take that paper in the file folder, and we go put it in a file cabinet. And it's there, and we know where it is, and it's not a problem, unless you're out that day and somebody needs it and they don't know where it is. And oh, by the way, how is that file cabinet labeled? I can't tell you how many times, whether it was a city government or electrical utility, just to pull some recent examples, this stuff is labeled with somebody's name. These are Mary's files. Well, Mary's not here. Or Mary retired 2 years ago. I don't know what's in it. You got to start opening drawers and start poking around. So, okay, the process works, right? We get it, we tag it, we do something with it, we store it, and someday, theoretically, we have to get rid of it. And I say theoretically because there are plenty of examples. I'm sure you can think of in your own organization. I see it all the time for a lot of companies. That's why I'm there, is to help them figure out what they do have so they can get rid of stuff. And so I've labeled it on my little map here. This never happens. Because people are afraid, well, what if I need it? And I try not to say that in a judgy way, even though it may sound like that. Because if you looked in my garage, you'll see that I'm subject to very much the same kind of a mentality. It tends to be old pieces of, machinery or bicycle parts or something, but I might need that, so I don't get rid of it. That's okay in the garage, as long as you don't want to put your car in, which in New England we don't do anyway. But it's not necessarily okay in an information context, because let's say somebody brings a lawsuit against you, and if you still have it, it's subject to discovery. You know all of this in broad strokes. So the process is the process, but you see that sticking to paper to execute this process has its drawbacks. It works, but it's slow. And it's not transparent. You don't have a ready way to figure out, well, where is this application form? Who has it? What stage is it at? Somebody's working on it. How long is that taking? When can the customer get their copy? You don't really know what happens once the paper leaves your desk. And that paper tends to hang around, maybe forever. And it's not especially secure. I can't tell you how many times I would go in, even just as a client, I would go to my attorney's office, or I'd go to the accountant, or, even a realtor has lots of sensitive information around. And especially when all the hoopla surrounding Sarbanes-Oxley and HIPAA and all those things kind of came to a boil around the same time. Oh, hang on, Steve, you can't come in. I got to put these files away because of the new regulations so you don't see it. How practical is that? It's a question I ask and answer by saying it doesn't really happen that much anymore. So however secure we think it may be, it's in the attorney's office, and that has a lock on the door. There's still lots of paper spread out all over the place. And if I wanted to cause trouble, or let's say I'm a reporter and cooling my heels while I'm waiting for the guy to get off the phone, we've all seen it in the movies, right? It's a skill to be able to read documents upside down on somebody's desk. So it isn't really that secure, because anybody with eyes, theoretically, can see it, or sneak it out to make a copy, or take a picture on their phone, or just something breaks in the ceiling and the sprinkler system comes on, and now it's all wet and falling apart. So these are all the arguments to get rid of paper. And don't take my initial comments the wrong way. I'm a big believer in getting rid of paper, but it's not practical to get rid of all of it. So that's a major point I want to make. You will eventually run into the laws of diminishing returns, and you'll spend more time and effort trying to get rid of the paper than it's worth. Okay, so now let's look at the other side of the coin and say, what if we electronified this basic process? And you're already on the way. Even that 1% person, people, who said they love their paper? Because I dare say, even in that situation, a great percentage of the information that you're dealing with, you're getting electronically already. You've got it in an email, or somebody scanned something, or even faxed it. Like in the medical community, local medical practitioners are still very much dependent on fax. So that, and by the way, fax is kind of an in-between because it's an electronic medium of sorts, but it ends up on paper. So the modern and even the lowest end of desktop systems will take that fax and serve it up to you as a PDF. So now it's an electronic file. Plenty of information is born digital because we're sharing Word docs or Excel spreadsheets or the like, or those PDFs. So you may love your paper. You may still be getting bills on paper, contracts to sign and all of that, but increasingly that's being done electronic end to end. And if you find yourself, as many organizations do, taking something electronic, printing it out, signing it, and scanning it back in, right there's an opportunity to make an improvement. Tagging it, still have to tag it, right? We would call that, metadata of sorts. It's the same word in the paper world, but electronically, a lot of stuff happens automatically because it comes with a timestamp. It comes with a to and a from, especially if it's an email. There's the discipline of auto-coding can take all of this and automatically extract more metadata than you can shake your fist at. And that's a good thing. You have to kind of rein it in so you think about it when you're designing what you want to do. You think about that up front. But now suddenly, instead of coming to you without really any kind of a label applied to it, it will come to you with a plethora of labels. And more, besides being more, is definitely better in this case, even if you don't pay attention to most of it because it's not relevant. So for instance, you take a picture on your phone, it will give you everything, the exposure and all that stuff. I'm not a professional photographer. That interests me less. But I want to know where it is. I want to know when it was taken, that kind of thing. So you're also free to pick and choose what metadata you deem is important to what you're doing. The process. You still have to process it. Now, being electronic, it's very straightforward to process things in parallel. It's very straightforward to keep an eye on which is that single source of truth. Even if you end up making copies of the file, not recommended in as many cases as you can get away with, you're better off sharing links than documents. But even if you did, you still know which is the one that you're counting as the quote-unquote real one, in a way that's very hard to do with paper. We continue along. It has to be used just in the same way it was used on paper, except now it's an electronic document, and that's what we have workflow for business process management, or RPA. I mean, there's a number of different terms to describe what's fundamentally the same thing, which is taking the information and getting it to the places it needs to be in the order it needs to get there. And that same metadata, chosen properly, can do wonders to really streamline a workflow. Because let's say, you remember we talked about our mythical Mary earlier who wasn't in the office that day. Well, theoretically, a system might know Mary's not in the office, but Fred is, and they work closely together, so anything that comes in from Mary, we're automatically going to route to Fred. Can't do that with paper. Certainly not as easily. So, more advantages accrue the more electronic you can get. Storage, the stuff still comes to rest somewhere, but instead of a file cabinet, it's going to be a document repository, perhaps. It could be an image store. It could be any number of things. And you'll notice I'm also not saying things like, oh, it could be in SharePoint. Because a lot of times I'm at organizations and they talk about SharePoint as if it were some sort of a generic receptacle. And SharePoint is widely known enough, it scares people. Not necessarily IT people, but users who have heard of it, or they have friends or colleagues who have used it in other places and it didn't work well because it wasn't implemented properly. And as soon as you say SharePoint, they freak out because that was terrible. It's just one of the tools. So we want to think in terms of the kind of place it is. Is it a database? Is it a repository? Some things still end up on paper. And so where is that being stored? Maybe it goes underground storage somewhere long term. So that's where, I say, you're not going to get rid of all your paper. You're going to cut it back drastically. So you may still need to store boxes of paper, but fewer of them. And for day to day, even if you still have to keep paper because of your retention rules, make an image of that paper and store it electronically. That way, if somebody needs to go see it, an engineering drawing from a building put up 15 years ago that's now having issues, let's say, you still have it. You don't have to take 3 days to go request it from the warehouse and back. Okay? And then you still need to dispose it, which is the disposal, side of the retention coin. How long? You can automate that too. Can't do that with paper. Not in the same way. So what you end up with is something that is instant. And it's because electrons move at the speed of light, right? With paper, the paper moves at the speed of people, however fast they can get it to where it needs to go. You can track it. You can install a largely automated life cycle, and it's easier to secure because it falls under the heading of all the cybersecurity stuff that you're doing anyway because you have to. Simply by taking stuff off the paper and putting it on the screen means you open up a world of possibility in terms of making what you're doing more effective and more efficient. So put more stuff on screen. That's my protest march for today. Now, in terms of getting started and in terms of carrying it through, I don't know how many of you may remember the movie City Slickers with Billy Crystal and Jack Palance. There's a still image from that. And, Jack Palance is the gruff old cowboy, and Billy Crystal's from New York City, and he's on vacation with his friends, and they're driving the cattle across the plain. Anyway, it gets very philosophical at one point. And Jack Palance, the curly character on the left, he says, you know what the secret of life is? Just one thing. And once you figure that out, you stick to that. And I won't fill in the blank that you see on the screen because this is a family show. Well, I also have one thing. When it comes to reducing the amount of paper that you're pushing and really doing almost anything that relates to information management or process improvement or information governance, the one thing is what business problem are you trying to solve? Because everything else will flow from that. Everything else. The tools that you pick, how they're implemented, how you train people to use them, the policies that you put in place, it all has to reflect the business problems you're trying to solve. And you should be thinking about that first, not last. So the person who called me a couple of years ago saying, I bought my imaging system because I had to use up my budget, can you help me? Had already missed the point. Because all I could do was say, how did you know what to buy? You don't know what you needed it to do. So maybe you want to spend less time and money looking for data you know you have, but you just can't find it. Or maybe you find too many copies of it. Maybe you want to increase the accuracy and integrity of that information. Is it right? Has it been hacked? This is information theoretically people in your organization are going to make decisions on. So it has to be solid. Maybe you want to reduce the risk of censure or the fines you have to pay because of some breach or a privacy violation or something, or for legal discovery reasons or compliance audits. Having things electronic streamlines all of those processes to a degree you can't imagine if you've never seen it or done it. Or maybe you're just looking to improve the security of all your content. And in this cloud-focused day and age, it's a real question. Who owns it? What happens if the cloud company goes out of business or gets bought? You're not just foisting the responsibility off to a third party. You still have to be involved, and the security piece is a big piece of that. You want to make sure nothing sensitive gets out and nobody evil gets in. So these are all reflections of the kinds of questions you want to ask. Lots of opportunity for value here. Eliminating paper. If nothing else, Imagine being able to get rid of 3/4 of the file cabinets in your office. Those are space hogs. And wherever you are geographically, your office space is not free. So if you want to add some people and you don't have room, guess what? You get rid of a bunch of these file cabinets, you get room for more desks. You don't have to pay for as much paper and supplies. You don't have to recycle your machine as often. Let's say you want to do a hosting model because you want to get more electronic. The hosting model is a great model for a lot of reasons, including you don't have to have the skills in-house to develop stuff or maintain stuff. You don't have to buy that hardware and software. You don't have to maintain the network. You still have a network, but you don't have to worry about all of that bandwidth capacity. You can template, pardon me, the way your processes go. This is how we do this, folks. Here's our process. Here's our route map, like when I just showed you. New employees, get on board like right away because it's already been pre-chewed for them. You've figured it out. It's all electronic. It's all right there. You just have to teach them how to use the tool. Same thing for training. Also, as you learn things, oh, we tried that and it didn't work. You end up embedding it in the way you do things because that logic is built into the workflows. Can't do that with paper. So I want to finish kind of where I started. Where I started was, don't worry about getting rid of all the paper in your organization, but do concern yourself with using less paper and dramatically less paper. The corollary to that is don't wait. I mentioned this earlier. You don't have to wait. Don't wait to figure it all out before you do anything because there's plenty of stuff to do almost by accident, simply by looking at the way your processes flow now and looking for obvious places to plug in the electronic tools. Like you printed that out and we ended up scanning it back in. Why? Maybe we don't have to do that. So pick a place and go on from there. But I do encourage you, pick a place and let's get going. So that's my exhortation. And I guess we're coming up to an election cycle, so I'll say, I approved of this message. So Damien, what say you?
Thanks, Steve. So I'm Damien Jones, product manager for OnTask. So Steve did a really great job of illustrating the business process problems at hand and what it is we'd all like to apply the right kind of tool to help us address. So great automation and process management software should allow you to scan and upload your current paperwork and transform into reusable templates automatically. Employees, prospects, customers should be able to use those templates over and over, collect all the necessary information for you to deliver your products or services to them. And you need to avoid leaving sensitive data laying around while it's being rekeyed into additional pieces of software like a CRM. Clean desk policies are so much easier if there isn't any paper that needs shredding. So great digital and process automation software should let you keep your documents on screen, store those templates, create copies, and let you execute each workflow time and time again. Digitally collected data from online forms avoids retyping that information ever again, or worse, having those duplicate copies laying around. Steve also mentioned having a great templating strategy. For each of your business processes, each of your documents that you need to route through to the right people within your organization, collecting the right data on it, making sure it was done right, you should be able to whiteboard those business processes and then transform those into a visual step-by-step workflow. And good automation software should power you to do that using plain language that you use every day. Should also be able to support multiple languages, both for your employees, participants, yourself, etc. So look for a good tool that allows you to map your business processes in a very easy to read and easy to follow format. Great automation software supports your staff by fully documenting your business processes and allowing people to launch the right workflow, the right template, without having to go hunt for, oh, which template do I use for this particular type of customer or this particular type of product or service. Let them know which one to execute at the right time. Staff members should know what to do in any given situation and be able to execute those without forgetting a single step. Great automation software should be able to track where every piece of information or every document is along that entire journey, and let your administrators instantly see whose desk is something sitting on, whose digital desk is it stuck on, who do we have to give a nudge or move along in the process, or better yet, have timers to automatically escalate and let the individuals know or let upper management know that, hey, this is not moving through in a timely fashion. If we think about all the costs and risks to your business of lost, missing, or over-replicated data, think also about those soft costs of just stalled data and how expensive it can be if we didn't respond to an urgent business matter in a timely fashion. Customers get even more upset or begin to get upset, or employees start to get frustrated. So being able to push things along automatically using a great business automation tool can really save time, reduce risks, and eliminate costs. As Steve mentioned, picking one thing and starting is a great approach to automation for your business. So begin automation for your teams by templating one of your common business processes and then expand over time to create more and more of these reusable templates. Don't forget also to plan ahead and template some of your rarer business processes. These might be anything like a product return or a press inquiry. Or if you're over in Europe, there are now privacy, personal information requests that have been passed into law. And knowing how to respond to each of those in a timely fashion, your business process management software can reinforce employee training that they may not get a chance to use on a frequent basis. They can then just follow and execute the well-templated strategy and be guided through the entire process. Steve also mentioned examining and picking the correct technology. So a lot of SaaS applications or hosted models are worth taking a look at. So be sure to look at how the software solutions that you're looking at for automation are delivered. Automation no longer has to be as costly as it once was. Big players like Google, Microsoft, Amazon, and many more in the cloud infrastructure supply space, they're allowing technology to be leased instead of bought. They can automatically scale up or scale down to meet demand, and these providers invest heavily in security. So they're really looking at, most of them have already deployed or allow vendors to deploy up to 256-bit AES encryption. So your data is safe in their Amazon storage facilities, et cetera, with redundancy, backup, all built in. This allows SaaS vendors to easily deploy, update, and innovate with their software and pass the benefits on to customers in a very safe, reliable way with their software solutions. Automation solutions built for the cloud that don't require you to give away your rights to your data will easily enable digital transformation and decrease your overall risks. So be sure to talk to any of your vendor and find out who owns our documents, who owns the data, and how easy is it to get it out of your system or to archive it within your system. Nothing is perfect, but SaaS vendors generally put security first, And the safety of your data in the hosting centers such as Amazon is getting better and better over time. So definitely worth talking about and having a look so that automation tools can be added to your arsenal at a vastly reduced cost and risk. So this is my moment for a shameless plug. So I talked about selecting a great automation solution. My bias, of course, OnTask is worth taking a look. So for your next steps and looking for that one thing to automate, as Steve mentioned, just picking a place, a short step and going there, think about scheduling a one-on-one demo with OnTask to see how easy it is to take your forms. So if you share a sample form or maybe a real form with us, see how easy it is to upload that, turn it into a digital version of that form, collect and route that data. So schedule a one-on-one demo for that personal approach. You can also join a group live demo if you are not ready to invest that one-on-one time. So think about registering for our next live demo, August 28th, 1 p.m. Or we also have a number of recorded demos that you can have a look at some of the features and functionality of the OnTask system. And this slide has links to each of those options, and we'd really love to have a chance to continue to explore potential solutions for your business and begin your journey towards automation. Or for those of you who answered the poll and said the 10% of you said, no, you're already there, have a look at us, see if things might be a bit better using a very modern tool that supports multiple languages, AWS hosted. Maybe it's just a chance to reduce costs. So with that, I'll turn you back over to Teresa.
And we've been listening to Damien Jones of OnTask, and before that, Steve Weissman of Holly Group. Before I turn the slide here, I just wanted to let everybody know in that resources area, download a PDF of the slides, and in there you will have access to all of these links for all the variety of different ways to reach out directly to learn a little bit more about the product offerings that OnTask has. But also in the resource area, there's some other really great reading, a resources section. I'm personally very impressed with what OnTask has on their website, and so there's a link there to some really cool reading. You click on any of those resources, it'll open another browser tab. You can check all that stuff out after the webinar. So there's a lot of good stuff in there for you to check out. And have some time now to take a few questions and continue to submit them in the Q&A feature. I do just want to jumping over to my own notes here and up here for the questions that are coming in. And someone's asking us, they certainly, they see the need, they get why we need to do this, but they're still unsure on how to get, the right team together to get started. How would someone go about working within their organization to try to get an initiative like this and to gain momentum to do this? Steve, let me go ahead and start with you, and Damien, definitely feel free to join in.
Oh, good. No pressure at all. Thanks. It's a very typical question. A lot of my conversations start that way. And I answer them. I say, first, take a deep breath. And second, it's not going to be as bad as you fear. Taking organizational politics off the table for the moment, it's actually pretty straightforward and pretty compelling, but the devil's in the details. And the politics and turf and budget squabbles, it's an inevitable part of this. And how you deal with that really depends on where you work, and that's why I say let's just not worry about that for right now. What I've found is well, let me back up. Here's what I do. The first days that I'm working with a client, I go and I talk to as many people as I have access to who are involved with the particular process or a small handful of processes that have been identified as problem points. before I get there, I ask whoever's driving the initiative, and we're going to presume for this conversation that it's you guys here on the webinar. The question is, what hurts? What keeps you up at night? What is the thing that that makes you go, why can't we just do, yeah? I want to know what that yeah is, because that's the thing that probably is going to get you the most traction in your organization. And unless it's some major overhaul of infrastructure, you probably can do quite a lot within your own corner of the world to demonstrate the concepts that we've been talking about. And, you know, the ancillary step to that is, that's your answer, now go talk to the people. Or, as I say, that's my first step, is say, I'm here because such and so says this is the thing that keeps them up at night. What does that look like to you? When you go to work in the morning, what is the thing that makes your hair hurt before you go home? And we work out everything from that point. That's the what business problems are you trying to solve step. I don't worry about technology yet. I don't worry about anything except what's the nature of the problem. And then we can start looking at how much of that is cultural or behavioral or habit, you know, habitual. How much of it is a meta-tagging problem? How much of it is a process issue? How much of it is the technology is old and simply can't handle it anymore? But it all starts with what hurts. So maybe that's helpful to folk.
I have a question in here specifically for Damien. Someone's in a Ontario municipality, and for the types of organizations that have to meet accessibility requirements. And talking a little, just briefly about the features and functionality of the OnTask product, can you talk a little bit about the accessibility and other kinds of requirements that your system can work with?
Absolutely. And of course, being in Canada, French is also important. Really great automation software built with a nice web user interface can really tap into features and functionality to support those with disabilities, individuals that might need to, execute the business process in French or a different language. So we a lot of great automation software, and OnTask especially, can really change the workflow based on prompts from individuals. So if the individual lets the workflow know with an answer, hey, I have these special needs or these multiple language needs, or I really need something that supports audio or visual, then you can branch into a separate branch of the workflow that will support either that multiple language or those special needs, and actually walk a person instead of showing them something that is meant for regular vision people or others. You can give them a web form that's more automated or structured in a way that they can really interact with that and still collect the right data and then join back into the rest of the workflow. So great question, and you are right. A great piece of automation software should support that.
Next question, I want to start with Steve on this one. Someone's asking, what are your thoughts on scanning the paper docs and saving it to a shared drive? Because this person's currently, their org is working on a defensible disposition process for electronic files on shared drives. Thoughts, comments?
It's a really good question and a very common one, actually, which is not a bad thing, by the way. Shared drives scare me. And it all, typical consultant, right? The answer really is it depends. Sorry, but it does. And what it depends on is exactly how is this shared drive being managed. Most of the time, when I see shared drives being used in this context or hear it being talked about, it's just an extension of the hard drive on people's computers, that they have directories listed either by department or by name. and you end up with just a bigger problem than the one you have. It's just, the only difference is you've taken the pile of information that's in the file cabinets, digitized them, and made a pile of electronic documents on the shared drives. But you still don't necessarily know what's in there and who owns it, and do we need to keep it, and all those other things that relate to the governance of that information. You know, the question about having paper, not having paper, very quickly runs into all these broader governance issues, necessarily because the only reason you have that paper is because of the information that's printed on it. And the only reason you have that information is because you need to do something with it. You need to process a claim or an application, or you need to make a filing with the SEC, or, you know, otherwise, what is the point of having it? So it's all about dealing with the information. It has, in the scheme of things, relatively little to do with the medium on which that information is stored. And there's a related question here that says, you know, is it enough just not to store paper? Which is another really interesting question, because, you know, it relates to the shared drive, because there isn't, all right, sorry, I got 6 answers running together in one. Let me start again. There is value to simply getting the information off paper, making it electronic, and putting it in a shared drive. And that a lot of that has to do just with the cost of physically managing paper. But it's a very limited set of values that you're talking about there. The human element to this other question of people being able to understand better what that information is by reading it off paper instead of screen, that's a very real thing. And I won't get into it all, but there are actually physiological reasons people respond physically differently to using paper, and that's fine. You know, allowing people to print stuff for their own use is okay, as long as, and I saw a comment to this online to this effect, as long as it's very clear that that doesn't count, that the real stuff is under management in some electronic repository somewhere. Shared drives are, to my thinking, very limited in terms of their ability to really manage stuff. So even the companies that I've worked with whose first thoughts were, we'll just take it all and dump it into SharePoint, and that's how they say it, all they're really doing is using SharePoint as a different sort of shared drive, but without the securities and the workflows and the meta tagging and all that other stuff. It's really a waste of time and effort and money. If you're going to do this, it's really worth doing it right and finding a tool that can bring those value-added capabilities to the table, or all you've really done is saved a lot of square feet worth of file cabinets. Mm-hmm. If that's enough for you, great, but it probably isn't.
And Damien, I wanted to get your thoughts on this as well.
Sorry, could you repeat the question, Teresa?
Especially the challenges, you know, because Steve was talking about for the people that do want and to print off a copy just to be able to work, and then just as long as they understand that that's not an official copy. But your thoughts or some ways to address how people need to work differently, and you know, the print, work, and discard paper because they don't like working on a screen. You know, your thoughts and impressions, and what you're seeing within your customer base for how other organizations are dealing with the challenges. That it's not enough. It's more than just storing paper and having less paper, even if they're still going to print it off.
Yeah, absolutely. We run into this very often. You know, there are those who, you know, just do not want to read on the screen. And so they want that physical, especially signing. You know, although our software supports full e-signature and does a great date and timestamp and IP address and other perfect information, you'll always have that one person that says, nope, I want a copy in hand, I want to sign it, and then yes, I'll either upload it again or I'm going to put it in mail and send it. Great automation tool, really, and OnTask has a philosophy that we bring the human back into the world of automation. So we introduce each other and get them to be friends. So in any of those workflow templates, it's easy to support those folks that aren't ready to go fully paperless. So you can either let them look at something on screen, or they can click download. At that point in time, they can read it, they can sign it, they can redline it, make comments, and then you can either let them answer the workflow and say, I'm going to submit this manually, or I'm going to mail it, or you can give them a file uploader where they can upload that back in and let the rest of the team continue on with automation. This kind of goes back as well to an earlier question. How do we get teams to start adopting? Sometimes, great automation software should support everyone on the team, but then other times it probably makes more sense to look at your business processes and see, do you have any that are literally just between one or two people? Like one of our customers, they picked the customer onboarding form. And that really was just one customer to an account executive, and that was their one thing they automated. So pick a solution that can grow with your business and support both the early adopters and then the paper diehards. And those solutions are out there, and shameless plug as well, we're one of them. So feel free to come and have a look, and I can show you that in action.
And we're getting close to the end of the webinar hour. Let me just mention this one other thing right here with what AIIM has with our newly updated Certified Information Professional certification. And as part of that, there is a you see here on the screen with the prep workshop. That's the foundations of intelligent information management. And if you're looking for some additional in-depth training, to just consider taking the foundations work class, whether you decide to advance and take the CIP certification or not, because AIIM does offer live and instructor-led training, and that newest course, newly updated, literally just about 2 months ago, is when we turned it live. That there's a lot of great resources available to you in addition to the what we have today for you. But online self-paced courses, AIIM can even arrange for a trainer to come to your place of business and offer classes for a large group of people all at once. And so go to aim.org/training or aim.org/CIP, and you can get a whole lot of information about the different types of training opportunities, the different types of courses that AIIM offers, and then certainly if you are interested in advancing your career with a Certified Information Professional certification, encourage you to check that out as well. And there was one more question in here, and I am going to jump back to it. And if we can just quickly, and this is going to be a longer answer question, so if we can just quickly touch on this before we conclude things today, and then we can follow up with more in-depth answers. And Steve, I want to start with you in general on this, and someone's asking about that the problem's not necessarily with the paper copies, but with other people, other departments making those digital copies and then manipulating them and changing the processes that were originally set. I'm sitting there going, well, was that record declared a document, or was that document declared a record? Or to me, it's making me go, oh, there's a whole lot of more questions I want to ask about this. But can you touch on the issue in general?
I can, and uncharacteristically, I'll be quick. It is another, if misery loves company, then you should feel all warm and fuzzy, the person who posted the question, because it's a common one. And that's a lot of the political fiefdom kinds of things, the cultural stuff that I referenced earlier. Because change management, not in the tech sense, but in the people sense, is a critical part of all of this. It's winning their hearts and minds. It's training. It's gamification. I actually have a whole course just on that that I can present or draw from very frequently. What I'll tell you just as a mantra is it's not enough just to say, stop doing that. Because bad cop doesn't work unless there's a good cop, and good cop doesn't work unless there's a bad cop. You can't say, here's a prize, good job, without some kind of threat of reprisal, whether it's part of people's annual reviews, if you still do those, or something, to get them to change their behavior. You have to work both sides of it, just like you do with your kids, because change management equals parenting.
That's a really great statement right there, which is a perfect way to wrap things up for today. We have recorded this webinar. You can come back and catch it at any time. We're actually going to be emailing a link out fairly shortly to catch the replay. Invite others, your colleagues, to come listen to this. Download the resources. Please take the feedback survey. I really do read every comment that you put in there. Very much want to thank our underwriter On Task. Without the support from our solution providers, AIM would not be able to bring you these really good educational programs like our webinars for free. So thank you, On Task, for sponsoring today's webinar. And just as we bring our webinar to a close, I do want to leave you with each of our speakers, their closing thoughts or key takeaway. So I want to start first with Damian Jones of On Task. Your closing thoughts.
Thanks, Teresa. I really just want to hammer home on picking one thing and starting it well, and putting a process and system, putting a good solution in place like On Task helps you create your processes and only gives the proper people access to make those changes and to ensure that that process and that document has a single source of truth. So pick a great solution, pick a single, simple business process to automate, and give it a try. And I think you'll be surprised at how low cost you can do it with a good tool, and how straightforward it can be to get started on the journey. And think about it in terms of land and expand. Once you've done a simple one and people realize that life is better this way, it's easier to tackle number 2, 3, 4, and each department will fall into place one by one.
Thanks, Damian. And Steve Weissman of Holly Group, your closing thoughts today.
Number 1, don't make eliminating paper your objective. Make your objective instead doing things better, doing information right. Use paper as an indicator of where processes can be improved, because those that are the most paper intensive likely are the most fertile ground for applying electronic technology. But the point isn't to get rid of the paper. The point is to work better, to work smarter, to work better together. And then figure out what business problems you're trying to solve and stay fixated on those. And with all love and honor and respect for our sponsor here today, and I applaud them, and Teresa really does read your comments, by the way, you want to do this thinking before you pick a vendor. And you want to do this thinking with the vendors that you bring in to vet. Because at the end of the day, if you find a vendor in your mix that can't really solve the problem as you stated it to them, then that's not the right vendor. It's not necessarily about features and functions. It's about how well those things can solve the problems you've identified.
Thank you, Steve. And just to add on to that, that once you do find your vendor, let them work with you and let them help you, because they've worked with a lot of other customers, and they have a lot of good consultative advice to help you through your processes as well.
True that.
So thank you, everyone, for your time today. Thank you, On Task, Damian Jones, Steve Weissman. Thank you all for AIM. This is Teresa Resick, and we will see you with our next webinar. Have a great afternoon.